The courtroom was silent. Every eye was on Judge Harper, whose gavel was poised over the final judgment. He had presided over many cases in his career, but this one felt different. The defendant, Marcus Wilson, a black man in his 30s, had been charged with a crime he claimed he didn't commit. The evidence was circumstantial, and the witnesses had varying stories. But to Judge Harper, the case seemed clear. Marcus had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now it was up to the court to decide his fate. After careful consideration, Judge Harper began, his voice steady and authoritative. "I find the defendant, Marcus Wilson, guilty of the charges against him." His words were final, but the room felt heavy with tension. Marcus stood still, his hands trembling, his face a mask of disbelief. His defense attorney, Jennifer Hayes, could barely conceal her frustration. "Your Honor, with all due respect, the evidence doesn't support this verdict. We request a reconsideration." Judge Harper didn't even glance at her. He had already made his decision. Marcus was to be convicted and sentenced to prison for a crime he didn't commit. It felt like justice was slipping away from him, just as it had for so many others before him. But as the judge prepared to call for the final proceedings, something unexpected happened. The courtroom doors opened with a soft creak. The bailiff, a tall man with a stoic expression, stepped forward. "Your Honor, there's an urgent call for you, from the Supreme Court." The judge raised an eyebrow. He never received calls from the highest court unless it was a matter of grave importance. His eyes flicked to the defense table, where Jennifer was watching him intently. This was a distraction, but there was something in the air, something that didn't sit right. "Take a message," Judge Harper said dismissively. But the bailiff shook his head. "It's for you, Your Honor. It's urgent." The room fell into a stunned silence as the judge reluctantly stood. He motioned for the court to be in recess for a few moments and stepped out of the chamber with the bailiff. As soon as they were outside, the bailiff handed him the phone. "Harper." The voice on the other end was calm, but its authority was unmistakable. "This is Justice Eleanor Westbrook of the Supreme Court." The judge's heart skipped a beat. Justice Westbrook had a reputation for being sharp, meticulous, and, more importantly, unafraid to step in when things went wrong. "Justice Westbrook, what can I do for you?" Judge Harper asked, his voice now cautious. "I'm calling about the Wilson case," she said. "You're about to make a grave mistake." Harper's face stiffened. "What do you mean?" "We've been following this case closely, and after reviewing new evidence, it's clear to us that Marcus Wilson is innocent. Your decision to convict him based on circumstantial evidence is not only unjust, but it's also a violation of his civil rights." The judge's mind raced. He had been so sure. He had been convinced by the testimony, by the prosecutors, and by his own biases. But now, a Supreme Court justice was telling him he was wrong. "What do you expect me to do?" Harper's voice was tight, his authority rattled. "I've already made my ruling. We expect you to do what's right." Justice Westbrook replied, "We're sending a full report to your office, and we've already arranged for an independent investigation. I suggest you reconsider your ruling before you proceed further." The words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, Judge Harper stood in stunned silence, the weight of his responsibility settling over him. His mind swirled with doubt, a conflict he hadn't felt in years. He had been certain of Marcus's guilt, but now the highest court in the land was telling him otherwise. "You have 10 minutes to reconsider your decision," Justice Westbrook continued. "If you proceed with the conviction, the Supreme Court will take immediate action to have it overturned. This case is too important. We're watching you closely." The line went silent. Judge Harper stared at the phone in his hand, the reality of the situation crashing over him. Back in the courtroom, Marcus's lawyer, Jennifer, paced nervously. She knew something had changed. The energy in the room had shifted, but she wasn't sure why. She exchanged a quick look with Marcus, who was still standing, his face pale. Finally, the door opened again, and Judge Harper returned to the bench. He stood there for a moment, his gavel held loosely in his hand, his expression unreadable. After further consideration, he began, his voice calmer than before. "I am rescinding the conviction of Marcus Wilson." The room gasped. Jennifer blinked in disbelief, her heart racing. Marcus's hands shook, and a tear slipped down his cheek. "Your Honor, what does this mean?" Jennifer asked, almost afraid to hope. "It means," Judge Harper said, his eyes meeting Marcus's for the first time with something resembling understanding, "that justice has prevailed." He paused before continuing, his voice softer. "And it means that I was wrong." Later that evening, As the courthouse emptied and the press swarmed around the story, Marcus walked free, his hands raised in triumph. But behind the scenes, something larger was at play. The Supreme Court had not just saved Marcus's life, it had sent a clear message that no one, not even a judge, was above the law. Justice Westbrook had won this round, but the battle for justice was far from over. For Marcus, this victory meant more than just freedom. It was a reminder that even when the system failed, there were always those who would fight to make it right. And for Judge Harper, it was a humbling lesson known that would haunt him for the rest of his career. He had learned that true justice wasn't about the gavel or the power of the courtier, it was about doing what was right, no matter the cost. In the months that followed, Marcus's case became a landmark in the fight for racial justice. His exoneration reverberated across the nation, sparking debates about the flaws in the justice system and the critical role of the Supreme Court in ensuring fairness. For Marcus, the path to freedom was not without its struggles. The years he spent wrongfully convicted had left scars, both physical and emotional. He received counseling and support, but the shadow of his wrongful conviction lingered in his mind. Yet, he found solace in the fact that his fight had brought attention to the deep-rooted issues of racial inequality in the criminal justice system. As for Judge Harper, the experience changed him in ways he hadn't expected. Though he had always prided himself on being fair and impartial, his decision to convict Marcus had come from a place of bias that he hadn't even realized he had. After the call from Justice Westbrook, Harper sought out further training on racial bias in the judicial system. He began to speak out about the mistakes he had made, using his position to advocate for reform and greater transparency in legal proceedings. In private, Justice Westbrook sent a letter to Marcus, expressing her hope that his journey would inspire others to stand up against injustice. She knew that one case wouldn't change the system overnight, but it was a step in the right direction. Though the case had ended, the ripple effect continued, and the battle for justice was far from over. Marcus, now a symbol of resilience, dedicated his life to helping others wrongfully convicted and advocating for reforms that would ensure no one else had to endure what he had. And Judge Harper? He never forgot the call that changed everything. Every decision he made after that day was weighed more carefully, with a deep understanding of the power he held and the responsibility that came with it.